welcome back to our anime show. I'm a Green Queen.
And I'm Binge Monster.
And today we have a special guest. Oh, I am so excited to share this guest with you. Team, we have Diana Qiao. This is the CEO of Otaku and an attorney specializing in intellectual property, which I hope we get so into so we can break that down for all of us. Your brand, Otaku, is a premier global brand specializing in producing licensed collectibles, home goods, apparel, and accessories.
I think we've been talking about this for a while. We're really excited about having this conversation, especially because I don't think just the average everyday anime fan who probably gets all the TikTok ads and all the Instagram ads for all these different stores that have anime related something to sell really understand the nuances of creating a business like this and what really goes on behind the scenes of websites like that, and let alone how intellectual property even plays a role in all of this. So I think unpacking that a little and also just hearing your story and learning about the evolution of this company is going to be really interesting to our listeners who, like I said, under normal circumstances would never even really have a chance to learn anything about this space. So from that perspective, I'm really excited for the conversation.
And selfishly, I'm so excited because it is so rare that we get to talk to a woman who I feel like is really trailblazing in this space. And so
You're too kind.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this. And before we jump into the business itself, I do totally want to get to know a little bit more about you and just ask you why did you choose anime as the focus for your business and for your store? Did you start out as an anime fan, or was it more of a strategic decision?
I would just say, actually, so my husband and I co-own the business, so we're co-founders. I would say, honestly, he's more of the CEO role. I'm more legal. He handles all the financials and operations, and obviously I'm a part of the operations too, but I handle the creative direction and legal for the most part. Now that we have the boring introductions out the way, we started this. Honestly, I can't take all the credit because actually this happened during the pandemic. So my
Mm.
husband and I went fully remote during that time. And during that time, because we had extra time from not having to commute back when we were living in LA, we were like, okay, so what do we want to do with that extra time? And my husband was like, you know what? Let's start a business. And I was like, recreationally? Let's just recreationally start a business? Okay. I was really hesitant about it. And so I was like, oh, I don't know what we should even start our business on. And I was really nervous about that. And he was like, I don't know. He's like, let's just do something though with our time. And so we were thinking a lot about it. And I remembered that previously on TikTok, I had seen the types of LED lamps that we sell.
Mm.
We saw I saw some horoscope ones and there was one that was like a dinosaur. And I was like, what if we made it anime? What if we, instead of horoscope or whatever, we do anime characters? And he was
Mm.
like, actually, that's a great idea. And then I was like, what would we even call it? We just make lamps? And we're like, anime lamps kind of feels generic. And I was like, weeb lamps kind of feels like an attack. So then we were like, okay, otaku lamps. And so then we were born. Admittedly, we were unofficial. Our licensors know this. We were unofficial for the first 6 months of our creation, and it was always our intention to get a license for that. And so how we got licensed was back then, I actually used to work in video games. So I used to work with this attorney. He's called the video game attorney, Ryan Morrison. Always getting his free shout outs, girl. But he was really influential in terms of, I guess, my career because he was one of the first attorneys that gave me a start. I always wanted to work in video games. And you would be surprised, or perhaps wouldn't be surprised, that video game attorneys and anime people really know each other. I mean, we're all nerds, so I guess it makes sense. So I actually knew a partner at this law firm who knew the head of licensing at Crunchyroll. And I was like, okay, awesome. Can you please introduce us? And he did. And then boom, after 6 months of being open, we got a contract with Crunchyroll. We shut down immediately because we were unofficial during that time. We paid double the back pay royalty. So the typical royalty rate times two as kind of a smack on the hand. But it's something that we always wanted to do. We always wanted to make things right and to be official. So that's how we ended up kickstarting our journey on that. So a little bit controversial because we did start unofficial, but we got licensed as quickly as possible and paid our dues.
I thought it could be interesting also because we're using the words licensing, we're using the words IP or intellectual property, but I don't know if everybody even knows what that means. So maybe we could just talk about like what is intellectual property and like why is like licensing important in this whole equation?
Sure, I guess intellectual property, the best way I could describe it is assets that you own or intangible assets that you own. So that could be copyright, trademark, or patents.
Mm-hmm.
So copyright, you cannot copyright an idea. It must be something put into a medium. And so basically, if you write something down, if you draw something and it's original, then usually it is copyrightable. You only need to register the copyright if you want to pursue a lawsuit. Aside from that, for example, let's say you draw something and it's your original character or your very original design, not fan art. It's basically protected the minute that you draw it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you would only need to get registration if you actually want to sue somebody. But most of the time, you don't need to take it that far. You could just send a cease and desist. Trademark is really indicative of the source as to the good or product. So that could be a logo, that could be, for example, like the Nike check mark, that could be a slogan, things of that nature. And a patent is usually things that are, the patent is one of the few things that you can patent or that you can protect that is an idea.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like things that are related to technology and stuff like that. I'm not super, I guess, well versed in patents. My main focuses are copyright and trademark.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a quick, brief summary. When we talk about licensing, a license is just means you're getting permission. So whenever you create merchandise that you don't have rights to, for example, anime merchandise, you have to go get permission from that studio or sub-licensor, for example, Crunchyroll, in order to make products with those characters. So with that copyright and with those trademarks.
Right.
Is it I'm gonna ask already a question just so I can understand. Is it common where you're getting licensing for like a cast of a show or you're getting licensing for like one specific character at a time?
So that's actually a really good question. So you usually get the whole show. And with the whole show, you get various assets. So there's something that's called key art, which is your typical like standard character poses. Believe it or not,
Mm.
a
Hmm.
lot of a lot of studios actually don't like it when you use screenshots because they don't usually feel like it's like the most perfected version. That's why they give you key art or key visuals.
Hmm.
And key visuals are usually what you see them use for like anime movie posters or a new season poster or something like that. In terms of sometimes they will let you use screenshots, but only ones that they specifically pick out for you. So you do when you license an anime, you get everything, but
Hmm.
you get everything in terms of you do get all the characters, but you don't get everything in the sense of you can't use a screenshot, or typically you can't use a screenshot that you find like at 4 minutes and 40 seconds on episode 1. They typically don't like it when you do that.
I just want to ask
So
another
yeah.
question here to add on top of her question. I know that if we, let's say we're talking about, I don't know, even Naruto, for example, that's obviously a really well known
Right.
title. Used to be that Naruto was split between different streaming platforms where like regular OG Naruto could be found on one platform, half of Shippuden could be found on another, and then whatever is most recent could be found on another. It was like split. And sometimes that happens. And I'm just curious if my understanding is that the reason that it happens is because the streaming platforms get rights for different, like, I don't know, either seasons or parts of the show. And maybe that's incorrect, but my question here is if a show is still airing, for example, will they give you if there's a cast member that maybe hasn't even been introduced yet, are you guys given access to that or is it only for existing things that have already aired?
So that's actually a really great question. It actually depends on the studio. Some
Okay.
studios will give you the asset and then say it's embargoed, which means
Okay.
here's the asset, but you cannot use it until this date. But you can go ahead and create products with it and get it submitted for approval.
Hmm.
And then once it's approved and once the date has passed, then you can release the product. Or some will just not put it in the folders at all until basically the character is introduced.
Mm, got it.
Interesting.
Interesting. And do they have dates? Do they say, like, here's the date, now you can use this character? Or do they just not even release the asset
Yes.
to you until it's released?
So, like I said, it really just depends on the studio. Some studios will give you the asset ahead of time and just tell you the date
Uh-huh.
on when you can use it or not. And then some studios will just straight up not give it to you past a certain date.
Interesting. So interesting.
No, I'm happy to see people interested in law because most people aren't. So I really appreciate it because most people would actually pay to not speak to an attorney. So
Understood. I want to go ahead and just kind of like bring it back to otaku, and I want to ask you, like we've touched on this definitely already in this conversation, and I want to just hear again from your words, like what are some of the things that makes otaku unique, and like what are some of the things that you hope that your brand is bringing to its fans?
So I would say it's because we actually like anime. So, and we're actually fans. The whole reason we wanted to start and why we thought of anime characters is because, we're giant weebs to begin with. So, and honestly, fun fact about us, every single show that we license, we've watched. Yes, that includes My Dress Up Darling. That does include Don't Tease Me, Nagatoro-san. Like, that includes even the most sus animes, we've seen them. So we are committed because we really want to like capture moments that fans really would want and really like. And in the process of watching the shows, we fall in love with characters too. So, and based on other licensed anime companies, so there's a lot of big ones out there. I'm not going to name them just for my sake, but I'm sure if you go to Hot Topic and look at the bottom of like most products, it'll show you who the licensee is. And you would
Mm-hmm.
be surprised that a lot of licensees, aka people that receive licenses from the studios, usually they are not fans of anime. A lot of them maybe were fans of anime back in the 90s, back
Mm-hmm.
when maybe they were younger, but a lot of them it's just a shill. And to be quite honest, a lot of it is just slap key art on a shirt, print, print, and like slap key art on a mug, print. And we really try to push the boundaries of what can be done with the key art and what can be done with screenshots, much to licensors, aka the studio's dismay.
Mm-hmm.
We'll try to like add filters, add effects, edit it, try to make it like bigger or try to, just present it in a really cool way. I really feel like our solo leveling line really spoke for that because a lot of people are like would not do all of that. And trust me, it took a lot of begging, like please, please just let us do this, like in order for them to say yes. So we do try to push the creative boundary as much as we can with knowing that we don't have the flexibility as unofficial stores, aka people that are, not licensed, that are just running it up. Which personally I think is art theft, controversial opinion, but you know, personal opinion.
I mean, it's also a legal fact, right?
I guess that's true.
Yeah. Oh, yes, yes.
Legally speaking, this isn't subjective. Yeah.
Yeah, no, hardly an opinion. Yeah, I wanted to bring up as you were speaking, the solo leveling collection is like with the
Thank you.
the piercings around the collar of the shirt and the graphic wash, like it's so good. And Alex modeling for it, so cool. I was like, this is awesome. Even the kaiju line is so sleek and
Thank you.
and it yeah, I think like you really like do a great job of kind of putting your own like artistic and unique spin on it.
Thank you. I can't take too much credit. We have an amazing graphic designer.
Mm.
Every single design she puts out is just gold. So honestly, shout out to her. We love her. And getting Alex was just such an amazing thing we were able to do. We honestly had no idea if he was going to say yes. One of our reps at Crunchyroll, shout out to her. She knows the manager for him because I think she got dinner with either him and his manager or something along those lines. And so, once we had found that out, we were like, what are the chances that we could get him to model for a solo leveling collection? Because she also is the rep for solo leveling. And she was like, well, let's just like put a feeler out there and see what he says. And thankfully he agreed. At first he came back with like a huge number, right? And we are like, I'm not sure if we can afford that. Like, thank you so much, but we can't. And they're like, well, wait a second. Well, what can you guys do? And so we told him honestly, and he was like, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll be there. And I was like, okay, dope. Thank you,
Yeah.
Alex. So we were super excited because what a better character to model Solo Lovely than the Jing Woo. So we're really fortunate for that, for sure.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I want to shift gears a little and talk a little bit more about you and your journey. I don't think that it's common to see people go from being an IP lawyer to creating a store like this. You talked a little bit about how the pandemic kind of provided that opportunity, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about like what that journey was like and what you had to learn along the way as you guys went through that process. I'm just super
Oh
curious.
man, gosh, I mean, I would say the amount of mistakes we've made and the amount of money we've paid in mistakes, we've definitely got us another degree just from straight up failures that didn't kill us. So there's that. But I would say, so just to give some context, back when, so this is way back when, so it's a lot of recall for me a bit. But like I had said, I was previously a law intern while I was taking the bar exam at a video game law firm. So that law firm doesn't just represent like video game developers, but they also represent, for example, esports players, influencers, et cetera, et cetera. My boss actually owns a separate esports company or esports agency.
Mhm.
I guess now influencer agency because he represents a bunch of influencers. Um, but basically, that was kind of like our source was just influencers, esports players, video game developers, et cetera, et cetera. So I was just an intern during that time, and I handled mostly, I would say, corporate law back then. I touched a little bit about intellectual property, but most of it was just corporate structuring and stuff like that.
Okay.
When we had both decided to start the business, mostly my husband's idea, back then he was working as a quantitative analyst, quant
Hmm.
for short, and he was working for the Securities and Exchange Commission. And basically, that's a fancy way of saying he investigated insider trading using like developing like algorithms and certain models in order to catch insider trading. So
Wow.
People who made too
even
much
though both
money
of
way
us
too quickly in a suspicious way.
Yeah, right.
Me personally, no. But yeah, so during that time, because we were both working remote fully because of the pandemic, we had like a lot of downtime. So
Sure.
after work, we would work on the business and like that could be answering emails, that could be fulfilling orders, et cetera, et cetera. And honestly, I would want to give my husband a lot of the credit because for the first few months while I was studying for the bar exam, that was really all him just carrying. And it wasn't until when I was done with the bar exam after a couple months that I jumped in and started helping out with customer support and things of that nature. It was honestly, I will say Otaku Lamps has really been, something I'm very thankful for because we never expected it to pop off. We were just like, okay, if this makes like $20 a month, that would be kind of tight because now we have $20 a month extra than we previously didn't. But like what ended up happening was after a couple months, like literally it just took off like crazy. And it was just so unprecedented. Like banks were locking, or like I guess payment processors were locking up and withholding money from us because they thought we were frauding. And we warned them like, hey, our volume, like our order volume is kind of crazy. Like, just so you guys know, so that you guys don't lock anything up, because we had a feeling that would happen. And so, banks started locking up our like money that we were receiving from customers because they thought we were fraud. And we had to start maxing out credit cards just to get through those first few months. But yeah, it was a crazy time. But I mean, thankfully we were able
Insane.
to make it back, and thankfully, yeah, it was a lot of crazy happenings during that time.
Yeah. I can't even imagine that phone call to the bank saying, "You've frozen our money. I'm not a fraudster. Please unfreeze it. I really need it." Like I can't even imagine
Yeah. The
how that conversation goes.
stress. No.
Oh yeah, and we were having that conversation on our way to um his dad's wedding, so it was really stressful. but but thankfully, like once the dates passed, once the 90 days passed, we got our money back. All of it was good. It was just, I mean, I understand from their side. I think maybe from their auditing team, they thought they understood what the volume was going to be like, and it ended up being different. But definitely back then, it took off way faster than we expected. Realistically, we both could have quit our jobs, like you know, 2 months in. But that's crazy, right? Because who would quit their job 2 months in? Because it was literally replacing our salaries. But then we're like, okay, that's crazy. Let's quit 6 months in, which is so much better. So that's basically what ended up happening was once we got that deal from Crunchyroll, we just quit our jobs and focused on Otaku full time.
I
Thank you.
wanted to, ask now that you've kind of like walked us through sort of like the journey and it starting with just like literally you two,
Yes.
boots on the ground, like doing everything yourselves. Like I'm interested in like today, like what are kind of like the specific roles or like tasks that like you have versus like your co-founders and maybe other people that you work with. I'm just kind of curious, like what does your day-to-day look like even now as like a CEO and a co-founder?
I would say most of it is reviewing contracts. It's not the sexiest answer, but it is the most accurate answer. It's usually reviewing or drafting contracts. Anytime we want to work with an influencer, I'm drafting something related to that. Anytime we want to work with either like another wholesaler or someone who wants to buy from us, I'm either reviewing the contract they give us or giving a contract, like a purchase agreement. Anytime there's like we need to update our privacy policy or there's a new law regarding either employment law, privacy, or copyright, intellectual property. I have to be on top of that. It's just really mostly reviewing and drafting these days, and then obviously research. So I would say that's a lot more of my role. Whereas back then it was literally everything like graphic design, law, like creating the social media content. Thankfully now we have a graphic designer, we have an amazing and talented videographer as well. We have a project manager to manage all of like she has to manage maybe like hundreds of project submissions to make sure things are getting done on time. And now that we work with Walmart, and on top of our own individual drops, we have to just make sure everything is coming out on time so that things can then get produced and then delivered. Do you mind if I walk through some of the steps that we have to
Of course.
follow in terms of product development and stuff like that? Usually, when you make licensed merch, that just means you have to get permission from the studio in order to make it. So that also means, aside from them giving you their assets, you have to use their assets in a way that they approve of. And a lot of Japanese studios are very particular on keeping the colors like either Pantone or as close as possible, or keeping certain aspect ratios of the character the same, which is completely understandable because you don't want it to look like it didn't come from that studio.
Hmm.
But you also get into trouble with, you know, wanting to, I guess, expand your creativity and then them wanting to keep things like very, I guess, traditional. And with a lot of Japanese studios, they do want to keep things as close to the original key art or original asset that they give you as possible, which is understandable. But I think, especially for a lot of American licensors, we want to like see how far we can take that creativity. But basically, the process goes there's a concept stage, pre production stage, and final sample stage. That's usually, there's only three stages if you're doing like anything that's print or what they refer to as 2D, aka, printing or type of acrylic art. And then
Hmm.
there's a lot more steps for like 3D, which we've only just started with anime on 3D. We've done 3D licensing or 3D, yeah, 3D lamp licensing for like things like Terrifier and Ghostbusters, but I guess in the Japanese licensing world that is somewhat new to us, so I'm only talking about for print merchandise for now. So the first step is design, which basically you just show them like what you think it'll look like on a t-shirt, on a mug, on whatever. You list out the original asset that you used, the name of the file of that original asset, and then you have to show where the copyrights and logo callouts and all that are located. And so once they approve your design, which it usually takes about, I would say 2 weeks for most licensors to respond, you then move on to pre-production. And so pre-production just means you create a sample to show them what it will look like. So for our lamps, we actually engrave it and carve it out and show them. Or for shirts, you have like a shirt that you print one off of, and then you like take photos and show them. Some request you to send in pre-production samples, but most of them will accept photos. Really, it's just to see how close does it match the original key art or how close it matches the original design concept that you submitted. If you have any changes, you should call that out. But again, that's another 2 weeks to do it or to get that approval. And of course, if they don't approve, that means you either have to revise it or they'll reject it outright. 90% of the time, they're not going to reject it outright. They'll just ask you to revise it in a certain way,
Hmm.
but that's about it. And then the third stage, really, once pre-production is approved, you can just run production after that. And then whenever like you complete running production or whenever your contract specifies you need to send them final samples, you send them like 5 to 7 pieces of the final sample so for them to review. But yeah, that's basically the whole process in a nutshell.
Just to be clear, when you talk about sending the samples, are you sending them to Crunchyroll or are you sending them to the studios in Japan?
So it depends. It depends who your contract is with. So basically, what happens is companies like Crunchyroll or Viz Media,
Hmm.
they are a what we call a sub licensee, and I guess that technically makes us a sub licensee. But
Right.
essentially, the concept is they license a bunch of rights from the Japanese studio. One of them includes merch rights. They then license out the rights they were just licensed to us and to other merchandise makers, I guess. So once they sub-license that out to us, we don't have the rights to obviously license it out to other people. So in those cases, we have to submit pre-production and final samples to Crunchyroll. But if you work directly with a studio, you send everything directly to them, and all your
Got it.
communication is directly through them. There's pros and cons to working with either or.
And if I understand correctly, even with the studio, they have some agent that is designated to negotiate on behalf of either the studio or maybe the mangaka, whoever owns the rights and derivative rights of that particular story, and negotiates with overseas or international third parties, like you just mentioned, like Viz Media or Crunchyroll, who will be the sub licensor in a contract with that agent.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah, so basically how it works is we have like a sales rep from either Crunchyroll, Viz Media, or from the actual studio themselves that we work with that will basically, when I say sell, I mean like for us to buy the right to license the
Right.
IP.
Right.
So that is essentially their sale. So aside from that, aside from the sales rep, whenever we submit products for approval, we have the, what is it called? We just call them a rep. So we have like an approvals rep that works with us, and that's a different. So at Crunchyroll, we have like different approval reps depending on what IPs we're currently working on. They have
What
different reps
shows?
for. And so we submit it to them, and they kind of, if we are kind of asking to push the envelope with the key art, it's nice to have them because they really are able to persuade and like advocate for us. Because not only do they understand the American market, they're able to communicate with the reps in a way that the reps can, I guess, more easily digest because they know if they know that there's certain restrictions, they understand why the Japanese studios may be feeling hesitant on stretching that creativity.
Sure.
So it's nice to have that advocate.
I was just going to say, there's probably several reasons why the studio might be hesitant to approve one for one particular title. Like maybe I don't know, the director or the designer of that anime is like, has a personality that's like very specific to like wanting to keep things exactly as is. Whereas like another show, I don't know, maybe they care about colors, but they don't care about the position. And it's just like personnel to personnel, right? Like it just depends who's working on that show. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would say their biggest concern is just staying true to what the mangaka wants.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you get these approved, it's not just, the rep, not just the approvals rep looking at it. It's actually people from the production committee looking at it. So it's kind of cool because sometimes you'll see comments from the production or animation committee giving their 2 cents on
Wow.
like, hey, can you change this or can you adjust this or, certain things like that. So it's really cool to see sometimes. And a lot of the times they also do get approval from the mangaka themselves. So it's a lot of fun. I know one thing that we did that we thought was really cool is the mangaka for Baki, the show about like buff dudes fighting. I'm sure you guys are well aware. We actually heard the two voice actors, the Japanese voice actor for Yujiro and Baki were really interested in the Baki merch that we made. So and they were like, hey, can you send us like some extra shirts so that we can give it to them? And we're like, hell yeah, we can. And so we sent them extra. We're like, how much do you need? Here's all the shirts, basically. But that was just really exciting because it just goes to show that it's not just, it's not just one person or two people. It's like people from the animation side, people from the production side, sometimes even the voice actors and sometimes even the mangakas seeing your stuff. So really cool and really surreal, bubbly feeling.
I actually want to pause here for a second because I think that what you just highlighted is not common knowledge. Even what the committee is, right? Like we're talking about something that I think the common anime fan isn't even aware of. There are these production
Mhm.
committees, and then just these committees, they could be comprised, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here. They're comprised of the companies in Japan who are footing the bill for production, as well as the studio, as well as the mangaka, and all of the artists involved. And they form this big committee that are all invested in making sure that this show is successful. Would you say that's about right?
Yes, yes. So they create like a sub, like there's so many subcommittees that it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
keep track of. But they, with the production studio animation and like, mangaka, whoever they have like overlooking it, because not all the time the mangaka will overlook everything. Sometimes it's just the big projects, whatever. They will create like a subcommittee, maybe of like comprising of like two or three animators or two or three from production to like
Mm-hmm.
look and approve the work. Because really, like, for example, when you work with Crunchyroll, Crunchyroll's the messenger, but they will also be your guide, right? Like, so
Mm.
if you submit something and they're like, hey, I know the committee's not going to approve that. Can you just change that real quick and then I'll get it over to them?
Right.
They're super helpful with that because you'd
Mm.
rather do that than wait 2 weeks only for them to basically tell you something that your Crunchyroll rep could have told you. So super helpful in that regard. And as you can see, if you've been following the timelines, it takes at least 4 weeks to get something approved. And that's if they didn't reject anything. That means that, like, if we have a Walmart order coming up and Walmart wants that turnaround quick, you know, that's 4 weeks that we have to wait on approval if we do everything correct and don't have any rejections. We aren't even counting for another 3 to 5 weeks to run production on like, 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 units. So
Wow.
yeah, so timelines can get pretty tight. And I'm sure some of our tightest timelines, it's like we've had 3 months to get everything done. And that might sound short, but that doesn't account for holidays, either Japanese holidays or Chinese holidays for manufacturing, or even just American holidays. And I know it seems like, how many holidays can there be? Because in the US, it's not that many. But
Yeah.
if you add in Japan's holidays and China's holidays, it starts to really stack up against you. And then you realize we have 6 weeks to get approval and to finish production.
Wow.
What?
That's pretty nuts. Yeah,
Yes.
that's really interesting. What about the language barrier, right? Like you're communicating with all of these different
Mm.
reps and these subcommittees and you're manufacturing. Like how's the language barrier work? Like, how do you get over?
So thankfully, in terms of reps, so obviously if it's through a sub-licensor, so if you work with, for example, Crunchyroll or Viz Media, you don't really have to worry about that. They kind of worry about those issues for you. And for the most part, like most of the Japanese reps that are assigned to like overlook this stuff can speak English. They're at least translating it to English. I don't really know. But even if you work with a studio directly, the rep that they assign you speaks fluent English. So you usually don't have to worry too much
Mm.
about a language barrier. I think when it comes to approvals, the biggest barrier is like a cultural barrier. Like for example, like a lot of the Western, I guess, IP owners that we've worked with, for example, Activision or Ghostbusters or Terrifier, you find out that they're actually a bit more flexible with how their IP is used. Sometimes they let you even create your own artwork. Obviously not the case all the time, but occasionally they do allow that. Do remember that that was the case with Terrifier and I believe Ghostbusters. Because not all of them will have 3D assets, so sometimes you have to create it yourself.
Mm,
But basically, but basically, you can get approval usually from like a Western company within like a day or 2 days. Because usually their designated rep is entrusted to basically like just understand the IP and to know what to look for. And so they can approve in 1 to 2 days. A few times we've had to have like some kind of committee look at them. But again, approvals tend to be pretty fast because one, they tend to be a bit more flexible with their IP, and two, they tend to entrust the role of the rep to just understand what the IP should look like and trust their approvals.
makes sense.
That's so interesting.
I'm
I
glad.
never would have thought that, but it makes sense. It's I don't know if it's surprising to me, but I'm interested that somebody like here could have like full say, or like one of your representatives that works at Crunchyroll, say like in LA or whatever, can have like a full say over what an IP looks like. It makes sense, but it's like surprising to me still.
So Crunchyroll won't. So they can't. They have to communicate to the master licensor. They have to communicate with the Japanese studio. So the Japanese studio still has anytime you work with anime, Japanese studio has overall say over everything. So Crunchyroll
Right.
or Viz Media will never get the final say. But Activision, but companies like Activision or Ghostbusters or Terrifier, usually their rep will get the final say. Usually.
I
There
see.
have been a couple times where we had to present ideas to a higher level committee, especially when they're new and they're not familiar with it. But most of the
Mm-hmm.
time, it's like, aside from that, it's pretty much, okay, we approve. That works. Good to go.
I see. I missed the distinction. I see.
My bad, my bad.
No, it's okay. I'm really like somebody who's gaining so much knowledge just from listening to you. Like there's even a lot of like
Thank you.
business jargon that sometimes goes over my head, so I'm really like a sponge as you're speaking. You know what I mean? And I'm even just curious, like we've talked about sort of like how you go about using IP or getting IP, and I'm wondering even from like which IPs you decide to pursue. Like how are you all kind of like making those decisions of like what shows you're gonna get the licensing for or pursue the licensing for?
I would say as fans, I would like to think I'm on the pulse of things, but of course, a lot of the times it could just be one, we've just really wanted it. So for example, Berserk was one. I knew it really blew up like over the pandemic and stuff like that. And it's
Mhm.
really popular in the gym bro community now, which is kind of the last community I expected it to be popular with, but I kind of get it. Like I do get it. But Berserk is one of those we picked up when it wasn't so popular, and really, that's because we wanted it. Just because my husband and I are huge fans of Berserk. He has a tattoo on his neck. I have a tattoo on the back of my neck. So, I mean, we both really love the show. And so we're like, I don't care if this makes me money. I just want it. And similar with Baki. My husband's like, I don't care if it makes us anything. I just personally want it for myself. I'm like, sure, let's do it. Other shows we decide based on just how much hype we kind of see on social media. Like we definitely knew Jujutsu Kaisen was going to be popular. I mean, we saw that like back in 2020. It just took us a while to get the license for it because
Mm.
another fun fact about licensors is that at least with Japanese licensors is that they are somewhat picky. They do want to vet you first before they choose you. So for example, a lot of like the bigger shows like for example Naruto or JJK or things like that, they want to see that you've had experience working in licensing first before they just give you the licensing rights. Usually it's like that. Similarly, before we were able to get One Piece or Dragon Ball or things like that, like we had to work with a couple other Crunchyroll titles like Darling in the Franxx or maybe smaller titles like Bungo Stray Dogs in order to kind of show proof of like we can work in licensing, we don't constantly infringe and like we respect licensors' rights, that type of thing, and show that we had experience. So
Mm.
that is just an interesting tidbit. But that aside, to go back to your original question, we pick based on what we like and based on pulse. And so, for example, we also knew Kaiju number 8 was going to be big before it was ever released as an anime because I'm sure you saw all the freaking TikToks about manga panels and things like that. We knew Dandadan
Mhm.
was going to be big because of all the hype around it before it became an anime. And then now we're looking into Sakamoto Days and things like that. So we do try to follow trends. I mean, I personally think we're on top of it, but I'm sure some youngster Gen Z born in 2010 could tell you that I don't know shit.
Man, and they love to do it.
People being born in 2010 feels so crazy to just say out loud. But I guess shifting gears, kind of, I'm curious because a lot of our listeners are anime fans that again I think come to listen to us. At least I hope to learn a little bit more about the industry in new and interesting ways. And I've never seen another podcast episode that dives into this world like we've been talking about. So, but one of the things that I think you might have a really unique insight into is consumer behavior as it relates to anime fans, given that you run a anime merchandise store. So my question is, what have you learned about anime fans as consumers, and are there any interesting trends or behaviors that you observed just selling to anime fans in general?
So actually, I'm really glad you asked that because that is super relevant and things that we discuss like all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I just want to preface this is not every anime fan, so take it with a grain of salt, but it is a
Yeah.
lot of them. One thing we
Okay.
noticed is that consumers don't really care if it's official or not official. Obviously, there are some that care, and I think it
Yeah.
matters more when it comes to figures because you could tell the difference between an unofficial and an official figure. I think like the differences in detail like really stand out a lot more. But when it comes to the biggest concerns when it comes to anime consumers that we've noticed is price and how cool it looks. So
Okay.
if it's a price that they can agree with, or if it's just something that looks really cool, that's what matters the most. And I think that's something that we really try to strive for. Like, yes, we're official, but I don't want that to be our only like selling point. I don't want to be guilting you into, oh, we're official, you should get from us. No, I want you to buy it because you think it's freaking cool. I want you to buy it because you saw it and you're like, I need to have that. So our
Mm,
biggest theme is to try to make products look as cool as possible and also to be fair with price. I mean, obviously there's certain things that are going to be a bit more expensive, especially when you talk about custom molding zippers or custom molding like metal logos. But if it comes down to, for example, like light boxes, lamps, even key straps, especially key straps. Like we try to be extremely fair about that. Like we do notice a
mhm,
lot of people sell these key straps for like $20 just for one of them, or 15, or a lot of unofficial ones will just like super charge it. But like for us, we try to not charge as much of like that gap because it's like realistically key straps don't really cost that much to make, and same can be said about stickers. But I see a lot of unofficial stores charge like $20 for like one sticker, and yes, it's beautiful, and yes, we can justify it as the artist that created the artwork put their time into it, but that also doesn't change the fact that you're using artwork that you did not create. You're using artwork that the mangaka creates. And I think sometimes consumers are like, well, I don't care. It's like big studio, big anime, right? Like, well, like you guys are official, so what? The money just goes to the anime, who cares? Or it goes to the production studios, who cares? But really, to me, it's more about the principle, right? Like, imagine you created a manga, you created a manhwa or a webtoon, and it blew up completely. Like, I know, for example, Lore Olympus is like a really beloved like webtoon, right? And everybody loved Lore Olympus because it was this artist that was creating it like with her own blood, sweat, and tears, and it became popular because of that. Imagine everybody's like ripping Lore Olympus with like unofficial merch and just buying it, and they're like, "Oh, whatever, she makes a ton anyway." Like, is that makes it better?
mm.
So I just think about that sometimes in the sense of a lot of these mangakas, they didn't anticipate on blowing up like this. Really, it's a shock for them and a blessing for them too. But I guess, does it make it okay to steal? And similarly, I think about that like if it was your friend that blew up, your friend starts like making this amazing manga and people are animating it now, and now there's knockoff merch. Is it okay for them to use your friend's artwork in a way that maybe your friend didn't approve of or maybe even likes? So I don't know. I guess those are things I wonder a lot. But at the end of the day, like I think the biggest thing that people are worried about is, you know, price and cool factor. And honestly, that's our biggest concern too. If we can nail both, that is our goal as well.
Love
I
that.
think first of all, just would love to echo everything you said. I it really did, that it's important to me too. I think principle is important. So I'm really happy that you said it in that way.
Thank you.
And I think you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but I know even like I've seen the website and you will put up, or you'll have like a competition or more like a giveaway for
Yes.
fans that if they like leave reviews, pardon me, and things like
Yes.
that. And so, I'm wondering like what kind of feedback you get from the fans that, have your products and so forth, and like how does that sort of thing influence, your product development or your marketing strategies and so forth. I'm just wondering how that sort of like one-to-one, is that the right term? I don't know if it is, but that
I think
that
so. I
direct
believe so.
feedback. Yeah.
I would say it influences a lot. And honestly, people are very helpful. Even if the delivery is harsh sometimes, I do think it's helpful. Not every product we've made has been perfect out the gate, and a lot of times we've had to like either take down pre-orders or we take down like the product and then remake it. Like for example, one of the biggest ones I remember is our Dragon Ball neon. So it's like a neon with like the 4-star Dragon Ball. And at first you could see like the wires connecting, like a thin gray wire connecting each star to each star. And like at first we were like, that's okay because it's not super visible, and it still looked cool. And so we posted it, and we thought it looked nice, so we posted a bunch of videos and, photos of it like that. And then we had like a comment that said like, that looks like shit. Why are the wires out like that? I contemplated it and I started looking at it and I was like, maybe he has a point. I'm like, maybe it looks unfinished because of that. And because of that, we contacted our manufacturer. We're like, is there any way to hide these wires or put it in the back or do something that where it's not visible? Lo and behold, our Dragon Ball neon now has no visible wires. None of our neons actually have visible wires anymore. And that's because of that one comment. And honestly, I do appreciate comments like that because it makes us better and it makes our products better. And obviously, yes, we get a lot of love and we get a lot of positive feedback of people being like, oh my God, love it so much. Every single comment that I read that says that truly, genuinely makes me so happy. Because I think about me when I was 12 years old at Hot Topic trying to find cool anime merch. And it's just a really cool, surreal feeling. Like, think I'm now the person making it for, I guess, younger people or people our age or just fans in general. And so it really makes me happy because there've definitely been times, for example, Brooks is my husband, just clarifying that. Brooks and I will go to Walmart and we're in the section where our stuff is, right? And we'll just watch people react. And it's always so cool when someone's like, my God, look, this is the wanted poster. Oh my God, it has a star or like not star, it has a collectible coin in there. Oh my God, look at this sticker pack, dude. Like, it's really cool to see those reactions. So it always really makes me happy and it makes me feel like, okay, we're doing good, we're doing the right thing, but always the goal is to do better. So even with current products, there's always something that we will not be happy with that we will want to do better next time.
Absolutely. I love that. As a product guy, hearing that is like it's like Christmas. Hearing how companies like are able to take like customer feedback and apply it. It's really interesting. And I
I
love that you
appreciate
got
it.
to actually go to Walmart. And I mean, I would probably do the
Yeah.
same thing, you know, just to get to see what people's reaction is. I'm sure you do that after every major release.
Yes, yes, absolutely. We have to because it's just I just want to see how the product is selling. I sometimes want one for myself because believe it or not, we don't send extra samples to ourselves. I don't know why we do this. This happens every single time. We'll like make it to order for like Walmart or Hot Topic or whoever, send it all to them and then leave nothing for ourselves. And I'm like, why do we do this? And so that I have to go to Walmart and buy one. And for the people in the crowd thinking, why don't you just, manufacture one off for yourself? Because believe it or not, it's more expensive to manufacture one off than it is to do the production run. So it's
Yeah.
better to just do the production run and then make extra. But we don't think about that. We're like, okay, thank God, the order's done, everything's delivered. Wait, we didn't make any for ourselves. Okay, well, we'll just go to Walmart and buy one too. And to be completely honest, like we'll cut into our own profit margin quite deeply just to make sure the product is good. So, for example, for our metal posters particularly, so I don't know how often you guys check the back of metal posters. Next time you see one that's being sold, a lot of them are made out of aluminum or some
Hmm.
kind of like cheap metal. Just see what
Yeah.
they're made out of. I mean, and also check the back because the back I can tell you is usually like unfinished or kind of like dirty or dingy looking.
Hmm.
Mm.
Basically on one of our production runs, it was going to cost us, well into the five figures, basically to make sure that the backs looked nice and polished. And
Hmm.
we were like, okay, is this something we should do? Is it worth it? And like, we looked at each other and we're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it because it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter how much of our margin that we sacrifice. It has to be a good product. It has to do well. And so we would rather like cut into that for quality than for us to, I guess, like gain that and then quality suffers. Because I do think anime fans are smart in that sense of yes, they care about price and they care about cool factor, but quality really matters to them too. Because quality
Sure.
will play into what they can justify for the price and for the cool factor.
Yeah. Agreed. Of the
Mhm.
very few actual items that I've ever bought, I've thought pretty hard about it because a lot of things really are expensive. And, I just came back from Japan a couple of weeks ago and I went to Akihabara and looked at the figurines. And I've never been a figurine person myself. I like to buy more subtle things. And, it was extremely expensive. And I got it. They were so well made. And like if I was gonna buy one, I would want to buy one of those. You could clearly, distinctly tell that was like an official figurine, and it was so well made. And but it's if it looked like, somebody had just put something together with no absolute passion for what they were putting together, it was really clear. And they were still expensive. It was super frustrating. I'm like, I'm looking at two different figurines of some of my favorite characters, and one is like incredible. It's like $150, and the other one is something I could create given 3 weekends of some time. And it
Oh
was
my.
just as expensive. It was super frustrating, you know?
So I will say you'll probably see more of those, I guess, knockoff figures at malls in the US. Because in Japan, actually, they treat intellectual property infringement as a crime. So in America, it's more of like a civil suit type
Sure.
of thing, or
It's not
not
a
civil suit,
criminal.
but civil. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
criminal, but in Japan it is criminal. And I think that
Good.
also, but I think that also forms like the way that they see like approvals, the way that they see intellectual property, and how careful they are with handling of their intellectual property, which makes sense.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I have one more question that I definitely wanted to ask, which is, in this conversation, we've learned a lot about just how difficult it is to establish, a brand with the sub licensors and the master licensors that can even grant you a yes to get your product to the assembly line and literally into a store.
Mm-hmm.
Like you walked us through that whole
Yes.
thing. But one question that still remains for me is like, how do you pick which category of a product that you're going to sell, right? I know that there's such a limited scope, right? You've talked about lamps, you talked about keychain, we've talked about clothing, but there are other categories of potential products out there. So I'm just curious, like, how do you guys select that? What does that process look like?
Actually, you guys are asking such fire questions, like honestly. So, actually, but it will require me to yap. So, in
Okay,
continuing of my yapping,
go for it.
basically they decide based on what current categories are occupied, who has those categories, where it's being sold to, and etc. And I'll give an
Hmm.
example of how that all plays out. So, basically, most companies are not quick to just give you any category that you want. They'll give you a category if it's niche or very specific or particular to you. So for
Okay.
example, when we first started, we were able to do lamps because during that time, there was like no, I won't say nobody, but not really a lot of people specializing in these type of acrylic LED lamps. And so, or LED neons for that matter. So it was very easy for us to get those two categories because there's not a lot of people doing them. However, it is harder to get things, for example, like metal posters, key straps, or stickers, because there's a lot of other licensees that are making them, aka a lot of other merchandise manufacturers that are making them. And that's
Hmm.
because we're not the first people to come up with these ideas, right? And stickers and, key straps, posters, stuff like that is relatively like a low bar to entry and has been being created for the past like 20, 30, if not more years.
Right.
So a lot of the times, if you want a category that's basically created by damn near everyone, it has to be somewhat either special and very unique or limited to a very specific store. So for example, we cannot sell metal posters everywhere for One Piece, right? As you can imagine, wanted posters are very common and a lot of people probably make metal posters for them. Or as so we've been told. Or maybe they have like one licensee that has that their specialty is just straight up metal posters. If that's
Huh.
the case, we cannot just sell to anyone, right? They're going to limit us. You can only sell the specialty and only like this one time because that's that way we don't compete with their other metal poster seller. Because if you think about it this way, if everybody sells metal posters, what's
Yeah.
going to be the differentiation? You can
Right.
say quality, but most people are going to compete on price. And it just
Right.
becomes this race to the bottom of I'm selling for 20, I'm selling for 10, I'm selling for 5. Like, and it just becomes this reduction of quality and pricing to the point
Mhm.
where there's no point in making licensees competing like that.
Right.
So sometimes when they give you categories, they'll section you off if it's very common. So for us, for example, metal posters, we can only sell into Walmart and we can only do that specific run in particular.
Mm.
Or like,
Okay.
for example, key
What
straps,
does
we
that
can
mean,
only
run?
sell
Sorry.
a run,
That
like a production run. Production run.
okay.
Sorry
So
about that.
you couldn't do another metal
Yeah.
poster in the future. This is the only one you're ever gonna do?
Yes, this is the only
Okay.
run that we can do. So we can only produce that amount for Walmart, and we cannot produce any more. That's just it for that amount, and then it's done. And then if they allow us, they might be like, okay, you could do another batch of metal posters, which we do have coming up. They might say you can do that, but it's with these certain characters, and again, it's only this run. It's basically on a case by case basis.
Sure.
So, or like
Makes sense.
with stickers, for example, there's a lot of people that make stickers, but for us, we're only allowed to sell to Walmart. That's it. Or
Okay.
maybe like some will allow direct to consumer, aka on our own website, but 99% of the time they limit it to that other business. Because if we can sell to like Hot Topic, well there's another sticker seller that's already selling to Hot Topic. Who's Hot Topic going to choose? Well, they're going to choose the person that offers them the best price, and then that whole thing starts again. So
Mm.
really, we were able to get more product categories thanks to Walmart. I know I'm giving them a lot of shout outs. I know, I'm sorry. Save money, live better. But really, we were able to get those other product categories because Walmart would be like, oh, well, can you make this? It's like, sure, we can make that. It's like, okay, then I want it. Can you go get the license for it? Or do you already have the license for it? And Walmart is also, I would say, like every retailer, it's one of, I guess, like, I should say, unlike every retailer, Walmart is pretty picky. And actually, you know what? I take it back. Other retailers are pretty picky too with who they work with because the quality, the cool factor, all of that does matter for retailers as well because they want to perform well. And at least for Walmart, if you can do something for them, they want to see how much you can do for them. And so for us, like obviously we're not the only anime people in that area in Walmart. There's other licensees that also work with Walmart. But they do like us in particular because we do try to offer like fresh items for them and different ideas for them. And maybe these ideas aren't so fresh in the anime category or maybe in terms of being unofficial. In the unofficial world, right? Like those little key straps aren't like anything new. But in the
Right.
official world, which is often a bit slower to adopt than unofficial world, it is something that's new for them and it is something that they want to try. And because Walmart has really been diving into being like into offering more anime merch, that is something that we've thankfully had the opportunity to offer to them. It's just these new product categories, these new types of products that hopefully fans really enjoy.
Yeah. Really interesting. By the way,
So
that's a
interesting.
huge accomplishment being able
Thank
to
Yeah.
get
you.
into Walmart. I mean, we haven't said that once, and it absolutely does not go without saying. It's a huge accomplishment. You guys should be really. I mean, how long did it take for you guys to break in? Like, is this a new relationship, or was this something that you guys were able to get early on?
I would say it's pretty new. I would say it's pretty new. So I would say like so Hot Topic I think took a year, or a year or 2 years, probably 2 years, and then Walmart took like three. So on our third year, we got Walmart. So we were really fortunate. We were at this B2B type of convention called New York Toy Fair,
Hmm.
and somebody from Walmart happened to pass by and really liked our stuff, and we were really excited. And so we honestly just got really lucky with that.
Wow.
So I really appreciate it. And I don't mean to bring it up to be annoying. I just mean to bring it up to because it connects to a lot of how we're able to negotiate for certain rights.
Of course, you have the volume. You can give
Yes.
them a lot of confidence
Yeah.
that you'll be able to meet some level of a quota or something that
Yes.
justifies why they should trust you as a vendor to offer the rights to, right? It just makes
Absolutely.
sense that they want to know they're going to
Yeah.
make money at the end of the day by providing this license to you. So, I mean, look, the stores would kill to have that. That's a huge Cinderella story. You just happened to be at an
Thank you.
expo. You had a great booth. The right buyer came and swiped, walked past your booth and saw it, or maybe saw something you guys were wearing, and that's an incredible entrepreneurial story. Like,
Thank
doesn't
you.
happen
I
every
really
day.
appreciate it.
I know.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you
the
so much.
casual hot topic drop. I heard that. Yes, we love it. Love to see like not missed on me.
I mean, I appreciate it. I think sometimes we forget because so we're in Hot Topic, FYE, we were in Kinokuniya for a little bit, Walmart, but I'm trying to remember. There might be a couple other mom and pops that I might not be thinking about right now that we're in. but we're always really grateful for it. Sometimes Brooks and I think, forget to celebrate because when we finally got Hot Topic, we're like, "Ugh, we should have got that a year ago. We should have got that last year." And when we finally got Walmart, we're like, about freaking time. Like, how long did this take? Like, so I think maybe sometimes we forget to celebrate. So I really appreciate you
Yeah,
guys. That's like very kind.
yeah, absolutely.
I know. I want to ask just one more question that really I hope to just kind of like, tee you up to let our community know about, things that are coming up for you and Otaku and truly anything that's coming up. But like, how do you see like Otaku evolving in the future? Like, what are some things that you hope to, expand on as far as like your products, your offerings, as much as you can say, I suppose.
My gosh, no, I love that question. I mean, realistically, we want to just be a great like hub or source of just really sick anime goods. Like, and not just like, oh, just cool looking stuff. Like, no, we really want you, when you buy our stuff, you feel good about yourself. Like, obviously, you should feel good about yourself to begin with, don't get me wrong. But you should, like, I want, when people wear our solo leveling clothes, I want them to be like, damn, I look good. I want when someone buys our key straps, they're like, damn, this is so sick. And I want somebody to like, when they buy like our lamps or something, like anything that they could put in their house, they just can't stop staring at it. And they're like, I freaking love this. And really, it's like we just want to get bigger and bigger into that. What I know one goal Brooks and I have for hopefully this year is we want to start going back to expos and conventions and offer huge like experiences. Like,
Mm.
you know how Gentle Monster, the sunglasses or eyeglasses brand, they offer like these type of almost art exhibit type experiences. That's something that we really want to offer people because it's not just about the goods. It's not just about lamps. It's not just about clothes. It's about what it means to be like an otaku, to be a nerd, to be a weeb, whatever you call it. Like, we really want people to feel a sense of pride because, back in our days, I mean, you guys are a bit younger, so maybe not so much your days. Maybe this is just my days. But being into anime was really lame and like something that you kind of hid around your, friends or peers because you didn't want them to know, like, oh, that you're some kind of weirdo or something. But now that, I get that it's cool, but I want it to be cool regardless. Even if you're a nerd, even if you're an otaku for it, it's something that you wear with pride or that you carry yourself with pride. And that it's not just, people that are like just seen as weird or live in their mom's basement. And no offense to anyone that lives in their mom's basement. I was there too. I graduated from my mom's basement. But it's like just something for the everyday person. I mean, I think it really fits with your guys' slogan, right? Where anime is not for everyone, but it is for anyone. And so I truly believe that as well. And so that's something that we really want to curate. And with bringing like experiential exhibits to Anime Expo or things like that, we really want to just re-emphasize that it's not just about the goods. It's about the experience of being an otaku. And so I know that's a whole bunch of like cloudy, like hippy dippy stuff, but that's really like what we want to achieve for sure.
I love it.
You have to remember, you're talking to two actors who studied acting. Man, Brett, give it to me. Give me the hippy dippy. I
We're
love it.
artists. We're artists in our hearts. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Thank
I
you.
was definitely one of those, weird otaku kids. I remember very well when it was not the social norm to like anime, for sure. You're too kind if I was too young, or if I'm currently too
I
young to
know.
know.
I know. I'm like, oh,
Definitely
young.
did.
Thanks.
Dude, me too. I mean, I remember when I was like role playing, there was like a Naruto forum you could like role play on.
I was in them.
Like,
I created my own character, my
yes,
own KK Genkai. I was all up in there.
yes.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Dude,
I had.
it was such bullshit when it's like the forum, like the person in the forum, like the sensei, would give like a
Uh-huh.
better grade to someone else when you wrote like a masterpiece with your
Yes.
paragraph, and the other person just was like, yeah, and then my OC, like Yuki-san, doesn't give a fuck. Basically their whole nonchalant vibe, they get an A in the class. Meanwhile, my tryhard OC is like failing and getting a scar from this incident. That's like bullshit, personally.
I actually don't think I've had a single conversation on this podcast, and we've been doing this for quite some time, with somebody else who did any role playing in the Naruto verse. I think you're the first person. That's a whole other side of me that I don't think I've ever talked about on this podcast. I don't even know if you knew I did that. Did you know that I
No.
did that?
I
I
mean,
mean, it's a whole
we
world. Like, we go on
I
mission.
want to have
Yes.
another podcast episode where we just do a deep dive into this, because this is fan fiction, like, at its peak. Like, this is so precious. What do you mean? You got grades? What do you...
It was serious business. It was serious business, though. Like,
It
to
was
get your
so
character
real.
approved, and like there's so much like
Yes.
politics. Yeah,
There was
and you
I'm
had to
like
be
some of the
active.
admin were
Yeah,
definitely sleeping with each other for sure, 100%.
absolutely.
Because how in the hell, like, yeah, it was, some of it was like BS. I'm so glad to meet someone else that did the Naruto forums, because
Yes.
I haven't yet to meet someone else that did that. I know someone that did Vampire Freaks. That's like a whole different thing. They also work in anime. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of us that were, the weird kids, and now that it's cool, and now they're being made into like gym motivational edits, which I get. I mean, I love those edits
Yeah.
too. Like,
Formerly
I mean,
like
every time,
Evanescence AMVs, right?
right? Like back when they were called AMVs. That's
Yeah,
the biggest.
100%.
Like, everyone now calls them edits. It's like, back in my day, it was an anime music video.
100%. Oh my gosh. Well, listen, this has been a phenomenal conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and hopefully this is the first of many conversations to come. Thank you so much for being here. I will sign off here. I'm Binge Monster.
And I'm a Green Queen.
Thanks so much.